The night was cold and hollow when 8-year-old Jayden Pierce first met the boy who would one day change the course of his life. He remembered the sound before he saw him, a soft whimper, muffled through the alley behind the abandoned laundromat on 46th Street. Jayden, who had been digging through a trash bin for anything edible, froze. He didn't trust noises. No child living on the streets of Philadelphia did, but the whimper wasn't the threatening type. It was the sound of someone trying, failing, not to cry. Jayden took a few slow steps toward the alley. The moonlight slipped through the clouds and settled on a small silhouette curled behind a stack of broken crates. A boy his age, skinny as a wire, brown-skinned, shivering, his face streaked with tears and dirt. "You dying?" Jayden asked. The boy shook his head. "Then why you sound like that?" The boy lifted his face. "I'm hungry." Jayden stared at him. Hunger wasn't something he feared anymore. It was just a part of life, like cold nights and police sirens, but hearing another kid say it out loud somehow strung harder. "What's your name?" Jayden asked. Elijah Brooks." "I'm Jayden," he hesitated. "You been out here long?" Elijah shrugged, which told Jayden everything. You didn't shrug unless the answer was too painful, too blurred, too heavy to carry. Jayden didn't ask again. He simply tore the stale bagel in his hand and held half of it out. Elijah stared as if no one had ever given him anything. "You sure?" Jayden nodded and shoved it toward him again. "Just take it before I change my mind." It was the first time they shared food. It wouldn't be the last. The two boys huddled together for warmth that night and every night after. They kept each other alive, running from older kids who tried to steal what little they had, dodging the men who prowled the streets looking for unattended children, keeping watch in shifts so neither would sleep too deeply. Within weeks, they were inseparable. By the time they turned 9, they had learned the rhythm of the city streets like a language only they could speak. Jayden was good at planning. He read people fast. Elijah, on the other hand, had a strange gift with things. He could repair broken radios, torn backpacks, bent wires. Once he fixed a busted flashlight with nothing but gum foil and a soda tab. Jayden called him Professor, and Elijah pretended to hate it. But even in the chaos of the streets, they dreamed. Sometimes they sat on the rooftop of the condemned apartment building they slept in, looking at the glittering skyline in the distance. "You think we'll ever live in one of those big glass buildings?" Elijah asked. Jayden would grin. "Not live, own." "Own," Elijah laughed. "You serious?" "Dead serious," Jayden said. "I don't know how, but we're gonna build something big one day, something nobody'll ever take from us." And Elijah, small and shivering, would nod with a faith he didn't fully understand. Their real journey began when they were 13. A winter storm had swept through the East Coast, and their hideout had collapsed under the weight of the snow. They ran from block to block looking for shelter, but everywhere was full, every doorway, every abandoned bus, every covered alleyway. By midnight they could barely feel their fingers. "We're gonna die out here," Elijah muttered through chattering teeth. "Not tonight," Jayden said, scanning the streets. His gaze landed on a neon sign, McPherson Pawn and Jewels. The lights were off, security gates pulled down halfway, but the side entrance looked loose. Jayden nudged Elijah. "Come on." "You're crazy," Elijah whispered. "That's a jewelry shop." "And we're not stealing jewelry, we're sleeping." They squeezed through the broken panel on the side door and slipped inside, expecting darkness and silence. What they didn't expect was a voice. "Close the door, you're letting the cold in." An old man emerged from the back room, his face wrinkled but his eyes sharp. He wore a knitted sweater and held a steaming mug in his hand. Jayden froze. Elijah stopped breathing. "Well," the man said, "you breaking in or freezing to death?" Neither boy answered. The old man sighed. "Sit before you fall over." He pushed 2 chairs toward them and poured hot water into cups. "I'm Mr. McPherson, and you two look like hell." Jayden clenched his fists. "We'll leave, we didn't touch anything." "If you touched anything, I'd know," Mr. McPherson said. "Now drink." They drank. It was the warmest thing they had tasted in months. "Where are your parents?" he asked. Jayden stared at the floor. Elijah busied himself with the cup. "I see," McPherson said. "Well, you can stay here tonight, but only if you follow my rules." He listed them. No stealing. No fighting. And no touching the gold display cases. The boys agreed instantly. But one night turned into two, then two into a week. Macpherson didn't say it, but he knew they had nowhere else to go. He gave them blankets, let them clean up in the back sink, and gradually he began to talk. He told them stories about gems, about markets, about investments, about craftsmanship. He showed Elijah how to differentiate real gold from plated. He showed Jayden how to appraise stones. One night Macpherson placed a broken gold watch on the table. "Fix this." Elijah blinked. "I don't know how to fix watches." "Learn," Macpherson said. He did, and he got good, shockingly good. Jayden, meanwhile, was fascinated by the business side. Why does this stone cost more? Why does this watch sell faster? Why do people buy jewelry in the first place? Macpherson smiled every time Jayden asked a new question, because every piece tells a story, and business is just storytelling with value. The boys absorbed everything like sponges. When Macpherson suffered a stroke a year later, Jayden and Elijah stayed with him in the shop until the ambulance arrived. He survived, but he could no longer run the business. On his last day in the shop, he called them to his bedside. "You boys remind me of myself," he said weakly. "You came from nothing, but you dream big. Don't stop dreaming, and don't stop building." He handed them a small locked chest. Inside were raw gold crystals, rare, unpolished, worth far more than they looked. "These are yours," Macpherson said. "Start something, make it real." Jayden and Elijah promised they would. A week later, Macpherson passed away. They were 14, homeless again, but this time with something precious, knowledge, courage, and a dream sharpened by pain. "We can't sell the crystals," Jayden said. "He trusted us with them." Elijah nodded. "So what do we do?" "We use them to make something new." Thus began the first spark of the empire they would build. The next years were brutal. They slept in shelters, washed dishes in cheap diners, took any job they could to save money. Jayden worked at a scrapyard during the day. Elijah swept floors at a mechanic's shop. At night they experimented with Macpherson's crystals, studying them, shaping them, learning their properties. By 16, Elijah crafted their first product, a gold crystal pendant unlike anything on the market, raw but stunning. Jayden sold it to a boutique owner downtown for $300. The boys screamed in excitement behind the store when the deal was done. "We're doing it," Elijah said, jumping. "We're actually doing it." Jayden laughed. "One day we'll sell thousands." He was wrong, they would sell millions. They built their brand on the streets first, selling handcrafted pendants, rings, earrings, crystal-infused gold pieces. People loved the authenticity. They loved the story. Elijah became the craftsman, Jayden became the strategist. They adopted a brand name inspired by their past, 46th Gold Crystal Co., named after the street where they met. By the time they turned 18, they had enough savings to rent a tiny workshop. It was barely bigger than a storage room, but to them it was everything. They slept on the floor, worked 16-hour days, and reinvested every dollar. They studied business online using free library Wi-Fi. Jayden learned marketing and investment strategies. Elijah learned advanced metallurgy and crystal growth techniques. At 19, Jayden secured their first bulk order from a small chain of boutiques. He pitched with such confidence that the owner assumed they were a fully established operation. The order required 150 pieces. Elijah didn't sleep for 3 days making them. The boutiques sold out in a week. Demand surged. For the next few years they lived on pure hustle. They faced setbacks, suppliers scammed them, equipment broke, they almost lost everything twice, but each failure only sharpened their instincts. By 22, they opened their first official studio. By 24, they launched their online store. Within months it went viral. By 26, celebrities were wearing their pieces. By 28, they opened their first flagship store in New York. The company exploded. Investors lined up. Magazines called them the street kings of gold. Their story became a nationwide inspiration. But the real turning point came when Elijah developed a revolutionary method to grow synthetic gold crystals with unmatched purity. He spent months in the lab, sleeping in his chair, eating almost nothing, chasing perfection. One dawn, Jayden found him standing over a glowing gold lattice structure. shimmering like sunlight caught inside a gemstone. "I did it," Elijah whispered, tears in his eyes. That innovation shook the jewelry world. It made 46th Gold Crystal Co. not just a jewelry brand, but a technology company. Their valuations skyrocketed. At 30 years old, Jayden and Elijah Brooks, once homeless kids with nothing but hunger and hope, became the youngest dual CEOs of the largest gold crystal company in the nation. Their headquarters stood tall in Manhattan, sleek glass walls, glowing floors, crystal installations that sparkled with the very pieces that built their fate. Yet through all the fame, wealth, interviews and celebrations, they never forgot one thing. They started with half a stale bagel in a freezing alley. The day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for their new headquarters, reporters swarmed them, cameras clicked from every angle, and the crowd roared their names. But Jayden's eyes drifted to the back of the plaza, where an elderly homeless man crouched near the steps, ignored by the security guards. Jayden nudged Elijah. "Come on." Without explanation, they stepped away from the reporters and walked to the man. Jayden removed his coat and placed it over the man's shoulders. Elijah handed him a hot meal from the catering table. "You warm enough?" Jayden asked. The man looked up stunned. You the CEOs they talkin' about." Jayden smiled softly. "Yeah, but before that we were just like you." Elijah nodded. "Don't give up, your story isn't over." They returned to the stage as the crowd whispered in awe. Every news article the next day featured the photo, 2 billionaire CEOs kneeling beside a homeless man, offering kindness. Jayden and Elijah didn't do it for the cameras. They did it because they remembered. They built shelters in Philadelphia, funded scholarships for orphans, opened training centers for street kids who had nowhere to go. McPherson's name became part of their foundation, and every year on the anniversary of his death, they visited his old shop, which they renovated and preserved as a memorial. One evening, Jayden stood in the quiet store, staring at the display where he had first learned the difference between plated gold and real gold. Elijah stood beside him. "Think he'd be proud?" Elijah asked. Jayden nodded. "Yeah, but we're not done yet." They never stopped dreaming. Years passed and their company expanded across continents, becoming a global powerhouse. Their headquarters employed thousands. Their synthetic gold crystal technology revolutionized multiple industries: electronics, luxury goods, high-tech construction. But despite everything, Jayden and Elijah stayed close. They argued sometimes, disagreed on decisions, challenged each other constantly, but their bond was unbreakable. One night, after a long board meeting, the two men stood on the rooftop of their skyscraper, just like they used to on the roof of the condemned building in Philadelphia. "Crazy, right?" Elijah said, gazing at the skyline. "We used to dream about owning a place like this." Jayden chuckled. "We still dreaming, just bigger now." Elijah nodded, thoughtful. "You ever think about the kids out there right now, 2 boys just like us?" "All the time. What if they never meet their McPherson?" Jayden turned to him. "Then we become McPherson, for as many kids as we can." And they did. Each program they funded, each shelter they built, each young orphan they mentored, they did it with the same fire that once kept them alive in the cold. Their success was never just theirs. It belonged to every kid who had ever slept on concrete, every child who had ever felt forgotten, every dreamer who had ever believed they were too broken to rise. Jayden and Elijah proved them wrong. They built an empire from nothing. They turned pain into power. They turned dreams into reality. But most importantly, they stayed brothers. Because in the end, gold crystals didn't make their company great. Loyalty did. Brotherhood did. The promise 2 starving 8-year-old boys made under a freezing sky kept them going. "We're gonna build something big one day, something nobody'll ever take from us." And they did. They built the largest gold crystal company in America, and an unbreakable legacy the world would never forget.